All right, so then let's talk about intensity. This is kind of a bigger one, but I'll try to make it a little bit quicker. So it's going to be talking about four things: trainer failure, RIR or RPE, load management, and strength. These are all variables inside of intensity that we have to consider when we are allocating volume to more advanced or less advanced individuals inside the gym and or yourself. All right, trainer to failure equals less volume. Immediately, if you train to failure, it accrues a little bit more fatigue than leaving a couple reps in the tank, because the goal when it comes to facilitating improved physique is to train to a proximity to failure and or failure. Once again, failure is potentially relevant towards the exercise, but 9 times out of 10 is form failure because the muscle in itself can keep doing the movement. It's just the nervous system's ability to try to provide better leverage for other muscles to intervene. And so when you've been training for years, you've adapted the nervous system to turn off the muscles that want to intervene, and you've taught the nervous system that this is the only muscle I want involved. If you were to train smart enough in this way, in contrast to someone who's never trained before, their capacity to train to failure is not as high, relevant towards the exercise, because some exercise is just easy to train to failure no matter what years you've been training, but your capacity to train to muscular failure and or form failure is greater. Your ability to do so is greater when you've been training for years, in contrast you haven't been training for very long, and or don't have the reps or experience or the evidence to suggest that you can train to failure. So then the fatigue is going to be greater with training to failure, so therefore less volume is required. RIR, RPE, reps in reserve, in contrast to reps perceived exertion. Usually like a 7 out of 10. So if I was a coach and provided an exercise program for this individual, I'd probably take that in consideration. I'm like, cool, like obviously relevant towards how much time they have. This is a big data set that we haven't talked about is how much time they actually have. But if we're looking at the optimal volume allocation, it's going to be really important. So if they're only training like 7 out of 10 intensity, therefore we need a bit more volume to get the right amount of adaptation, right? Because the goal is to train to failure or proximity to. And so if that's not happening, then more volumes probably need to facilitate the same adaptation as it is to just train to failure. Load management. So 3+ years, warm-ups, feeder sets, cluster sets, just to get to the working set. So more time, more intensity equals more fatigue equals less volume required. Just think about if I gave someone who's been training for 3+ years 7 exercises once again, and every exercise they're very strong, then they would require a lot more warm-ups, a lot more feeder sets, and a lot more cluster sets just to get to their working set. And through that time, fatigue that occurs physiologically as well as psychologically, then we would want them to get the most out of the session. So therefore, we want less volume. In contrast to someone who's been training 0 to 3 years, they're doing accidental working sets because they don't know how to warm up appropriately. They don't know what load facilitates failure. Like actual failure, so they're just picking loads and sometimes they're progressing, sometimes they're not. And so more volume to improve this skill and capacity, because they need more evidence to know what is a warm-up, what's a cluster set if required, and what is a true working set to train a failure. And they're not as strong. So is that due to their mind or evidence to suggest as much? So therefore they need more volume to understand this. Strength. 3+ years, more load, more rest, higher fatigue equals more volume, less volume rather. 0 to 3 years, less load, less rest, lesser fatigue, higher volume. Once again, if you're in the gym and you've been training for 0 to 3 years, I'm not calling you weak or anything, I'm just suggesting that in general statement. Because of this, if I gave you 4 exercises a session, you're probably gone in 45 minutes. And if you're someone that wants to get the most out of a session, and the most evidence to suggest that you can train to failure and more reps for the nervous system, understand how to train to failure and inhibit other muscles to be recruited and provide better leverage, then more volume is required to accrue all of that. Cool.